para você saber, tá? Quando começamos, para você abrir. Vou escrever, estamos ao vivo aqui no chat.
Bom dia, pessoal. Estamos começando mais uma sessão do Seminário Internacional Arte, Educação e Democracia. É uma proposta que vem da ADAAP, Associação dos Artistas Amigos da Praça, da SP Escola de Teatro e da MT Escola de Teatro. Temos acadêmicos e artistas de 16 países, de 3 continentes, e a gente tem sessões às 11, horário de Brasília, às 13 e às 15 horas. E todos os dias, às 17, a gente termina com um pocket show. O seminário ele vai até sábado, dia 7. Então, todas estão convidadas a participar. Temos tido discussões muito interessantes. As sessões das 11 em inglês, as sessões das 13 em espanhol e português, e as sessões das 15 em português. Então, a gente vai dar continuidade aqui agora com os convidados, fazendo essa sessão em inglês. So, people, in the name of SP Theater School, MT Theater School, and ADAAP, I would like to thank you again. You were so kind to join us in this project. You know, we believe it's a very important action that we have to do now. We have to position ourselves critically and politically, because here in Brazil and many other countries, we are facing several challenges nowadays, and we believe that those subjects are very relevant for the social development of the world and for the good welfare that we need to keep living in this planet. So I would like to make a short introduction about this session. At school, we like to work in horizontal levels. And then when we were developing the curatorship of this seminar, we decided to talk to the guests. All of them are people that we believe and we know the work. We respect so much as artists and scholars. And instead of giving you the subject of each round table, we decided to ask you first to hear you about some topics you would like to approach, you would like to talk about. And then the direction of this session, it goes in this way. We try to unite similar topics according to some convergences and so on. And then, of course, there are some specificities in each one of the speeches, but they are more or less on the same universe. And everything related to this idea of citizenship, public policies, pedagogy, that will be the main points of this session. So then I will make a brief introduction of all our guests. So I will start with a very nice partner that has been with school since 2015. We have developed several projects together. Saana Lavaste, she's professor of directing in the Helsinki University of the Arts and the head of the degree program in directing since 2016. Thank you, Saana.
Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you.
Thank you. And then I go to a new partner that we met recently in the Zoom land and in the virtual world. And I invited her, and she made very nice proposals for this session. Thank you, Yulia Kleiman. She's a theater critic, curator, and associate professor at the Russian State Institute of Performing Arts in St. Petersburg. Thank you again, Yulia, for joining us in this project.
Thank you for inviting me. That's nice to be here.
Nice. And then I go to Professor Aleksandar Dundjerovic, Director of Research in Performing Arts at the Royal Birmingham Conservatoire. We were talking yesterday, and he was in Brazil and already published some books with a friend of mine. And we are glad you are here, Aleksandar. Thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a great initiative to do this.
Thank you. And then I go to Thomas Brennan. He is a visual and performance artist, film colorist, and currently the adjunct professor for post-production at Stockholm University of the Arts. Stockholm Uni Arts has a long cooperation with us since 2012. We have developed several student and teachers exchange so far, and they are very close friends too. Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you, Marcio, and thank you all for joining us today.
Great. And then I go to Juan Peralta, who is actor, playwright, theater director, professor of dramaturgy course at the University of the Republic in Uruguay. Juan is also a very close partner. He taught some years here at SP Theater School, and now is in Montevideo. He knows very much our pedagogical system. And so thank you so much, Juan, for joining us.
Hello, and thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Great. So, Saana, I will start with you. And having this idea of these initial propositions you made. And then I would like, in your first reflection, your first thoughts about this very important point, I believe, nowadays, for we discuss. So what kind of pedagogical strategies art educations can use to empower the students into thinking critically? It's something that we believe it's very important nowadays. Yes. In the world we live.
Yes, I think it is. And it's also kind of demanding question, because I think that the artists, now I'm talking from Finland perspective, where we have quite stable democratic situation compared to many other places in this world right now. But what we do have is this kind of an apathy feeling. I think that comes from feeling of, well, there are certainly many reasons maybe to this, but people tend to think that they cannot have an effect in this society, maybe not through art, and not otherwise either. You know, people don't vote. That's kind of general thing. People don't vote, and they don't believe maybe in this kind of, I don't know where this apathy, we can discuss it, where would it come from? But people are maybe more aiming to, you know, working inside the art field in a way, art talking to itself. And then the question is that how do we maybe wake this sense of meaning, that art can have a meaning and impact in society, and empower this feeling that, you know, citizenship and artistic, being an artist are both, you know, you can be both and you can be active in the society. And I don't know, we have been trying to develop systems where the students could have more voice inside the university. We have quite, you know, 3 academies joined together. But I think still, even in that system, the students easily feel that they are not heard. So I think this horizontal, what does it mean to be horizontal, I think is a very good question, because it's kind of losing power as the, you know, program leader or whatever. And you have this maybe thoughts of what it is to be a citizen or active citizen. And it's also a question that maybe young people today, most of my students are between 20 and 30 years old, so they are not very young, but I mean, you know, but anyway, I think the ways of being active are new, and maybe I don't even always recognize them. And sometimes they are like more, how could you say, like one theme projects that, or they kind of, when they want to commit being like having an effect, they put together a working group and they want to talk about representation of gender people on like different like genders on stage, and they're very passionate about that one thing and they focus on that one thing. But I mean, I've been wondering and thinking how to make the students understand systems, processes, and organizations, because they tend to focus in, you know, like one team, and then the understanding of system, I think, is also important. So one of my answers has been that I've been starting to teach art and production in a sense that to understand the structures you're working in, be they artistic structures or societal structures or whatever structures. So how can you change structures, and how does structures affect the art you do, and how, because I think you cannot, think about content or art without the structure, because the structure defines the art you make. So in that sense, you have to understand the structures and try to have an impact on structures if you want to create something specific. So this is one of my answers, that, instead of only focusing on the content and the quality and then aesthetics in my teaching, so I've been trying to find out ways of teaching leadership and structures and production structures and counter strategies on how you can work with art in structures that are not maybe art structures and these type of things. So this is one of my thoughts. How could you go about? But I mean, it's the feeling of how can you make the students feel that they belong and they have an impact on a structure that is a university or a study program or a theater or a society. And yeah, these type of things I'm wondering. Yeah.
Great. So now I go to Yulia, that has a theme very related to this topic too. We could talk a little bit about the theater education in Russia as the reflection of the society. Yulia, may you tell us a little bit how is the situation right now and how you see the connection among these themes, arts, education, and democracy?
Probably that Russia has voted for the constitution this year, and it means a kind of one more new conservative turn. And the main problem both in our society and in our education is this conservative turn. And in terms of theater education, it means continuity of the system of hierarchy, of conservatism. And why I called my topic the theater education as the reflection of society, because they have the same absolute vertical type of education that hasn't been changed for many, many years or even decades. And it was formed originally as every group of students as a small future theater with the master, with, big letter M, like main director, and the group that would be future theater. But actually, I see that both actors and directors are mostly prepared for the theater that is not existing anymore. So this is a kind of fantastic situation. I would say that it has its positive things, because best masters, best professors are really developing the skills. They developing Stanislavski system. They are trying to use different approaches and inviting some other professors for workshops, and they really give good tools for actors, like fundamentals of actors, skills of voice and speech or dance or whatever. But basically, understanding of the theater and society, and everything is quite conservative among among most of our teachers. But I saw the situation with one of our directing course who studied with a very conservative and old professor. But on the third year of education, they just got the idea that they are studying something that doesn't have almost any connection with the real life. So they just decided to try themselves to find some new ways. And they started to try to participate in different laboratories, because, we have laboratories that are organized around theaters. They tried to participate in some independent small performances or in some independent festivals. Some of them started to work with them inclusion with the deaf people, with the blind people, and continued to work with them even after the graduation. And I saw that after the graduation, we had a group of really motivated people who got everything that they could get from the traditional education, you know, these 3-year basics. But after that, because directors are studying like 5 years, and during the 4th and 5th year, they almost started their independent way in profession, and they found their way, and they have most of them are working very well, both staging in professional state budget theater companies that they have been prepared for, but also they're working so much with all this, you know, inclusion, with the small independent groups and whatever. So I would say, like in society, we have in our theater field a big gap between the state budget theaters who make a lot of conservative art for the state money and for the very conservative audience, but at the same time we have, like, you know, like a grass that comes from the, you know, cement, the wild grass that comes itself without any financing. We have a lot of independent groups that are formed both from our graduates and from people who came from digital, who came from technical institutions, and who have no money but who have an interest to make you know, some non-conventional projects. And I would say that even pandemia also somehow developed this type of the theater, because somehow our students got more free time, and I saw that some of them started to produce their own digital projects that, you know, that were created on the border between gaming, game design, and theater, and participatory practices. And this is type of the theater that they are not taught at all, like that they don't have access to that kind of theater during their education. But during the pandemic, they somehow started to look for such workshops because, for example, festival, the point of access that is usually site specific, this year was totally online. So they also got some workshops from here, some lectures, and received the opportunity to try such projects their own. So I don't see now any decisions, because like we can't change this system, we can't influence on that. I would say that only each lecturer, each teacher who wants to change something, like me, for example, during my lecture, I could give some accesses, I could send them some links, some books, I don't know, some videos, and say, you know, let's try, let's do this. So probably only by small steps of doing something, we could do this. But now I don't see like any possibilities to change either our political system or our, you know, system of education. So that's all. Only small steps and independent, you know, things.
My next question to Aleksandar is related to this. And as you know, like the political situation in Brazil is pretty terrible. And with the pandemic, it got everything even worse. And then I'd like to ask him, Aleksandar, about the pedagogical approaches and political consequences of the pandemic on live performing arts and education in UK. How is the situation for you, and how you see this phenomenon? I believe, yeah.
Sorry, I mute myself in the case there's some sounds to anyone disrupt. Yeah, this is amazing platform. I was preparing a little script here, but like everything else with Corona, you have to go off script because things change from day to day. So Lavaste said something very important about the impact and influence of students on education. And like to connect from this perspective, there is no impact. That's not going to happen. Right now, with the online control, students are just set up in one directional way. I'm talking about theater, I'm talking about live performing arts. And linking that to Yulia, is actually very interesting because I collaborated a lot with Russia, and I actually studied theater directing in Yugoslavia, which kind of patterned itself after Gitis. And it's very interesting because you said it will not, and you're absolutely right. It will not within the official structure, but official structure are gone. The life will do it, because your closing sentence was the students are going on their own and doing things on their own. And there is something phenomenal happening. I will bring it now to UK, where my collaborator Paul Sadot observed that actually a lot of groups are now in UK stepping outside and starting to connect on their own with the audience. So you do not need any more government control, because the government control is everywhere. You know, it's a mythology that is, you know, there's a bad East and good West. No, that does not exist. Control is everywhere. It's just a question how you control and what level you control. So what happens here is that now you don't have any more arts council saying which is good art and which is bad art, but actually artists are starting to take that freedom and overlooping, very similarly to what Julia has observed that is happening in Russia. So bring it back to UK. I'll try to be fast. I'm talking at 5th of November. The 5th of November is an important day because today we have a Guy Fawkes holiday or a celebration. This is the guy who tried to blow up the parliament in 1605, and the famous anonymous movement, cyber activists been using the mask of Guy Fawkes. So today is that day. And so it's very important to start talking about the kind of impact of COVID in terms of like what it does, both in sense of performance and politics. First, if we look at the guidance, the government guidance basically, because in UK, they love to put the guidance. Everything is to be prescriptive, and then you follow the prescription, and then everything's going to be fine. If you follow prescription, everything's going to be fine. So what happens here is that they set up a guidance in which they say the social distancing for performing arts, the social distancing from each other has to be established. And on the floor, you need to mark so that the people know where they can place themselves. That applies for rehearsal and performances. Obviously, you need to wear the mask, and you need to observe those rules. Anybody who even by accident went into a theater understands that that's the end of theater, because you can't mark on the floor where people are going to step with a mask and they're going to talk to each other. Yes, you can favor specific forms of art, which again are very interesting, but you can't have theater as we know. So it's very interesting that they push work outside, and that they're talking about reducing the cast, even orchestra. So basically, imagine like you have an orchestra, so you have like now half orchestra cannot perform because of social distance. So then, but again, the question is, you enforce specific type of art. So that's why I said I'm starting from 5th of November to say that things are not coincidence, that things are somewhere leading us in a very unknown territory. Also, use of technology is being kind of placed as something that is relevant to us. Now, one of my colleagues from Conservatoire who is working live with students observed after the session that we in theater, in the class, we have to observe this social distancing rule, which is very hard to run any kind of pedagogy with those rules. Yet when he was walking out, he saw a sports field where it was a football or rugby or one of those sports, and they were practicing. There was no social distancing, there was no mark, there was nothing, because they were, let's say, outside. That wasn't given to us as an option. So the question that he posed is why the sport is allowed to do things the theater education is not allowed. It can stay there. It can stay there as a possibility. So the way that this immediate consequence was that we have to move digital. Now, digital is very difficult to connect to live. However, there are now experiments, and I'm involved in experiments, and Rodolfo Garces Vasquez is leading one of those experiments. We're now working with him, Royal Birmingham Conservatoire and Sachiros are working on an experiment where we're putting a Macbeth progetto, Macbeth, and we are now exploring Macbeth as a Zoom live performance, following his pedagogy, in his way. And maybe if this is successful, we can apply this to what we're doing. Because just in practical terms, everything that we were supposed to do in December, and we went with the model of doing a performance but no audience, yeah, with our students, and then filming that, because audience is banned from theaters. Another very interesting thing, if you think that there is a tradition of banning audience from theater in England at specific points in time. So now we can't even do that because university decides to remove students earlier. So we don't really know how we're going to assess these students. We don't know how we're going to continue. So the connection here is that the consequences of this is such that you start inventing things, and the invention of these things will start changing the platform and changing the way things are happening. So potentially, maybe a new pedagogy, something new will be born. Something what Yulia observed, the way the students are going out, the way the practitioners are going out. Maybe the next thing, maybe that's the new theater, maybe that's Rodolfo calls that Netflix theater. Maybe this is something that needs to happen. So, and just to bring it back to this notion of the politics and performance, is that UKRI, UK Research and Innovation, the key website and the key body that controls our research and funding that we do. When it talks about Corona, it gives description of the bat and people eating bat and all this kind of fantasy. And then it goes, the precise origins of this disease outbreak remains unknown. So yet we have all these things implemented and major effects are happening, but we don't even know where it comes from. And we certainly have no idea where it goes. And just to finish it, the notion of the science, which was interesting. Brian Cox is a physicist from the University of Manchester, one of those personalities, which is TV personality, to kind of sell physics to the audience so it becomes like acceptable. He was brought in a children program to talk how they are now teaching kids physics in the lockdown. And he was saying that this science doesn't exist because obviously it's a space in which various opinions exist. But politicians, in a spin of that, realize that if you use the science for the public, and that's also performance, that's for the audience, they believe it. So they call the evidence, they call this the science. And so we're on the road, I would say, that we don't know where we are. And I will finish by bringing in the chaos theory, the butterfly effect, the glitch. And I would say that all that now is taking place. We are restructuring something on a collective unconscious level without knowing what we are restructuring. But things are happening, things are moving, and we are discovering something else. And I do believe that democracy as such has been imploded. Doesn't matter where you are, because it's about control. It's about government telling you what's good for you. And you know, I do come from Yugoslavia, and I do have a history of Stalin. And Yulia would know that what Stalin did when all these millions end up dead was not because he was a bad guy. He was doing that to protect them from the virus that comes from outside, which would erode the great socialism and the great beliefs. And so what governments are doing now, they are not allowing us to be with friends, to see the kids. They close you down because they're protecting you. See, this is the good model. Anyway, I'll leave that here.
Good. So thank you, Aleksandar, for sharing your perspectives. Now I go to Thomas, and he proposed a very interesting topic because it's very much related to the way we work at SP and MT Theater School. He would like to talk a little about the needs for democracy in arts education. And as I said in the beginning, we have this long cooperation with the Stockholm University of the Arts since 2012. And I believe our mutual pedagogies are affecting each other, have been affecting each other. And then I'm very proud and glad when I go to Stockholm and see how they incorporated some parts of our pedagogies, and we do the same. And so then I would like to ask you how you believe we can do this shift from this master apprentice pedagogical models into more democratic frameworks?
Thank you, Marcio. Well, first off, I think that we just need to, it's one of those things of awareness first, that there's an awareness of these models and that they have existed for many decades in the film education world. We have moved. We're actually in a transition right now at Stockholm University between this kind of master apprentice model and this new kind of distributed democratic model of educating young filmmakers. So we have a new class of 36 students. They have kind of a general a line of study that they can follow. They had 5 choices of different topics. They could go down a directing line. They could go down a montage line, a line of an image line, or a radio line. So they have these kind of 5 paths that they can take. But during their first year, it's very much a group experience. They all learn all aspects of the filmmaking and storytelling process. And this is something that, as teachers, we have been struggling with ourselves, because the prior model, and this kind of points to something that exists here in Sweden. We would only bring in 4 directing students for a 3-year course, 4 editing students, 4 scenography students, 4 film sound students, and each of those 4 students would have a professor assigned to them. So it was a very luxurious kind of situation for them, for both the teacher and for the students. They were very much cared for. They became a very kind of intimate group as they're working. But we also felt that they were kind of lacking when they would leave the program. That, again, as others have mentioned, this was not the reality in the real world. There are these now different mediated forms that we are working with. Not everyone is going to work on an action film production. 90% of the material we're seeing now is on the internet, for instance. Television has kind of has imploded in a sense, and with the introduction of Netflix and all of these kind of streaming channels. So we needed to find a way to educate our students in a way that they could be viable film workers, in a sense. This idea of democracy and I emphasize the in arts education, is about giving students this certain levers of power in their education, so that they are able to make decisions, they make choices that are not these top-down decisions that the master apprentice model often offered them. So in a way, what that does, in my opinion, is that it allows them to be a lot more critical in their thinking and in their approach to exercises that are given. They have to make their own decisions, and we do a lot of kind of group work. We put them into groups, and they solve issues together, and in a way they begin to be educating one another. They become teachers as much as we are teachers, and reversely, we become actually better students as well as educators. We learn an incredible lot about what they are dealing with and what concerns they have in this type of system. The master apprentice system was a very passive system. You just take in the knowledge, you follow your mentor, but now it's more of an open system, and they can be engaging with other students that they have an interest in. Other students are providing them inspiration for certain ideas. And so it's not just a one-way, a kind of a one-to-one street here. It's a very much a collaborative effort. And this is something that we're trying to sustain. Now, we're also dealing now with a new master's program, and what we're struggling with is this idea of well, I mean, it's in the title, master. You know, so we, you know, there is still remnants of the master apprentice in the master education model, and it's going to take us, I think, some time to kind of work that out. I would also bring up, you know, this, you know, the school here is a fairly elite school. As I mentioned, we bring in 30 students every 3 years. It's very competitive. You know, we have 100 or more applicants for each position. It is state funded, so we have incredible resources, you know, with film studios and grading suites and sound suites. And the apathy that you mentioned earlier kind of exists here as well. And part of it, I think, is because so much is given to the students. And, you know, I'm part of an Erasmus program we just established with Egypt. So we are working with the Arab Academy in Cairo obviously it's on hold now with COVID, but to bring students and teachers from Egypt, but more importantly, to have our students go to a country like Egypt, which does experience more democratic difficulties. And I'm being nice here. And to have them experience what it's like for an artist in a culture with those types of difficulties. How do you make art in a state that censors you, in a state that you know is not necessarily in favor of supporting or both financially as well as aesthetically and emotionally what you're trying to do. So yeah, I think that's a kind of a roundup, I guess.
But so it's very interesting for us because, as you know, we use a lot of Paulo Freire pedagogy,
yeah.
Who in the last years, although it's a very worldwide respected pedagogue, but here in Brazil, they are trying to diminish his work, you know, because of these conservative movements we have been facing. So now I go to Juan. And Juan is a former teacher here at SP Theater School, and then he knows a lot when we talk about learn from each other and with each other. And I also would like to thank you, Juan, because the title of this session, Artistic Training, Public Policies and Citizenship, came from him. We believe that it was a good name to unite all of your propositions. And then, Juan, I'd like to ask you to talk about a little bit about the things in Uruguay, and also if you want to make a connection about your time in Brazil.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was listening to you all, and it's very interesting to start to making links between what you have said. For me, it's important to locate art education in a more wider context, because we make art in our societies, and art has an impact in society. So art has a political element that is quintessential to art. A lot of the conservative vision of art education intends to erase the political consequences of art and the political link of art in society. So when we talk about art education, we are talking about politics and we are talking about society, and that is very important. And pedagogy reflects not only arts, as Julia have said, reflects society. The pedagogy we use reflects our political ideology. Here in Uruguay, we are having, unfortunately, we have a right-wing government now, and art is suffering, and art education is suffering too, because our programs are being cut from the university and from schools. So it's very important for us to keep struggling and to keep fighting in this context. I want to talk a little bit about the links between art and the development of citizenship, because I think that is important also. What kind of society we are shaping is through our art education. I believe here we have a program that we teach theater in public high schools. So that program allows us to develop the students' own voice and to start to understand each other's voices. So it is a program that now is under revision, because of course it's not profitable from the point of view of why are you educating on theater? We need to educate young people to get into the work market, not into the artistic market. So we are fighting to defend that art and theater education is part of the it's a necessary part of the development of citizenship. So because Saana talks about apathy, and here too in Uruguay we have a pretty stable democracy, yes, but for example in the last elections a far-right wing party enters for the first time the parliament. So I remember I was teaching at the university, and I asked to the students, what is the meaning of this change in our political environment? And what is the relation between that change and our work? Are we responsible in some ways for that change? It is possible to impact with our work in the shaping of our society, and why and how? I think that's a very important thing to answer, and to understand that our processes of production of art and our processes of production of the art education, the relation, how do we shape new works and practitioners are linked. So I was wondering, and I would like all of us to talk a little bit about this. We need to take art and put in the middle of society, and to put also in connection with politics, with pedagogy, and with the people that is outside of our art world. Because sometimes we talk about art between us. We are artists, we are lecturers, we are practitioners, but there is a lot, there's a huge amount of people that is outside our world. And we don't have a clear, maybe, of course, ISPE, MT, I think all, there are a lot of different institutions and schools that are concerned about that. But there is a lot of people that is outside our art world, and we are not talking to them. And we are not having an impact, a dialogue, a conversation about. And this is quite important for me now, because we look at the world and the world is becoming crazier, and we are more to ourselves, locked down, not only in our houses, but in our minds, in our mindsets. And how do we break that? So it's a lot.
No, it's interesting. So it's crazy because in the past, like few years ago, we had to fight to show the importance of art and human science for the social welfare, that not just the natural sciences are important, to understand the world and to develop the world. But now in Brazil, even the natural science is disbelieved by our government, and this is so crazy that it's difficult to face this kind of situation. And another paradox, I believe it's very, very hard to struggle with too, is that people are getting more and more binary. And we are not computers. We don't work with 0 or 1. People just can understand white or black. There is no gray, no red, no green any longer. People just know how to think in this, yes or no, good or bad, right or wrong. And so I'd like you to talk a little bit about these things.
Please, Marcio, I can comment. I think what you said about that also research is getting, kind of questioned. I mean, at least research that doesn't lead to immediate economic growth. I mean, we are in the same boat, art and human research and many other fields. And I think we should really, join our forces in many places, because the question of freedom of research and scientific thinking and freedom of creative thinking in art, they are the same thing in a way. You have to ask questions, you have to take risks, you have to ask uncomfortable questions also, you have to be critical. So in this sense, we are in the same boat, and we have to kind of defend right to both of these. And I think in Finland, there is one private foundation, Kone, who builds the elevators. So they have even started, they are very progressive in that they have started this kind of program where they give money to projects that bring together science and art. Mm-hmm. So you have the both sides. And I think this has a big impact, because art can reach people in a different way than science. But to bring these together in an environmental or societal projects where you make new assumptions and try new methods, I think would be a very powerful tool to change structures and bring new knowledge in new ways.
So I would go from that, and actually what Juan said, if it's Juan, if I'm saying your name properly. Okay, so what is the action plan to get out of this mental, let's start mental lockdown. So, and what Levante said. So yes, that's assessment. So what do we do? Is it possible just to run from just like a little bit on what would be this new structure, this new way of democratizing society based on the ruins that have this COVID, either nature or man-made imposed on us? What is because it's here and it's killing us. We are potentially in UK looking at September 21 to start with life. We don't know. So what would be the action plan to start moving out of this?
I mean, what I was talking about with having a more democratic, having the students be in a more democratic frame of mind, or recognizing their contributions and their input. And I think what Yulia was saying about these students going off the ranch, so to speak, and finding these solutions. I think I think what you're saying there, Aleksandar, we may have to rely on our students and these younger generations to kind of find some of these paths towards these new ideas of democracy. They are very much immersed in their worlds. They are immersed in the technologies. They have understandings that we don't. I mean, I really feel that we as guides, as teaching guides, can kind of help them find some of these solutions. I really have found in this COVID pandemic I've been incredibly inspired by some of the things that have come out of our students. in this particular crisis. And I mean, sometimes crisis is a great stimulant to finding solutions to problems. And I would really open this up to them. I mean, I would almost enjoy having kind of monthly or even weekly kind of sessions with the class to kind of have these kinds of discussions with them and see what kinds of things they come up with.
Mhm.
Oh, this is phenomenal, Thomas. Thank you. I think I'm actually following this in my institution. Very good.
Yes, I would like to add, for me was very important this year during lockdown in the first semester to work with the students, how we could devise path of communications in these situations. So we work a lot with mixed media, theater, film, sound, podcasting, reading, and to use all the different ways we have to storytelling and to get to the public and to get to the audiences, to different audiences, and to people that is always with a cell phone in his hand or through Zoom meetings. How do we do art in this context? And I think that that thing that Thomas was saying, the students are showing us the way, and we need and we have to walk with them. We are in the same path together.
One thing my students are wondering is that how do you fight the algorithms? The thing of this binary thinking comes from something that is called this echo chamber, that you only see in the internet what you already think and what you like, and how to then bring people into theater or art, which is not comfortable or maybe not something you already think. So it becomes more radical and maybe more difficult to bring people in because, and I know some examples, for example, in Denmark, they made this performance that was called Rocky, this boxer film. And in the end, that I don't know, remember, maybe somebody does, but they bring on the stage in the end a right-wing politician to talk to the audience. And this performance was very criticized also. But the idea was exactly to break the bubble. So the people who come to theater, they despise that person, and that person despises the people who go to this theater. But to bring them together, to put that person in the stage and give that space to this dialogue. So it's not comfortable, but that might be really political action only to break those bubbles in that sense. But I think one question is this question of algorithm and us fighting for this visibility of, things outside the comfort zone. So how do you do that? Yeah.
May I also add, I liked the idea, I guess Thomas expressed that we are giving our students also tools, we are giving them strength by giving them knowledge and instruments, they will make them strong. So I would say that now it's probably it's always, but now it's quite a difficult situation how not to lose the fundamentals of knowledge because the speed is so increased that there is such a temptation to take only the surface. So how to keep the amount, not the amount, but the quality of knowledge, how to keep the fundamentals of knowledge, but at the same time not to be a dictator. So how to keep the interest, not only to, let's say, digital, what is, bright and nice, and not only, let's say, in participatory, but also to give them these basics of really important knowledge that they could somehow develop and use and whatever. For example, during the pandemic, my students asked me what we could do more together because we ended our lectures, and we decided to make the seminar of discussing the plays, of 18th century. But it was so interesting because they became to be involved into really difficult discussions of somehow plays that are difficult to read, that provoked them to spend a lot of time for reading, for discussing. It was difficult, but it was both interesting for them and for me. So
that's a very interesting point. I'm sorry I'm jumping in, but it's amazing because I discovered that the same with my students. Exactly, because I run practice research for PhDs. And what happened is that we are on a very tight, almost industrial way of doing a PhD. So it's always run, project, mission, objective. And Corona suspended that, like with your students. So what we did, we started reading. So I said, listen, next 3 months, we can't do anything because we were the first lockdown. So I gave them to read Foucault, Descartes, Baudelaire. And I said, let's start reading. And when would you actually sit down, start to read? Because, we're kind of professional academics. We don't read. We just play off references. When do you actually sit down and read? And even us, when did you honestly sit down and engage with any of that and kind of like, okay, let me spend now a couple of weeks and read this, go through this. And so I gave them their material.
That's very nice. I always want to add to the reading that I have also started teaching reading. I mean, techniques of reading, to become aware of how you read and try to redefine or learn many ways of reading. And that's been very interesting. And also this kind of democratizing the reading process. So it's not me who knows or you who knows, but if we have this phenomena that is this text and we can read it in many ways. And this has been, I think it also helps with this media and everything. So to learn how to read and different methods of reading, I think is one, but I think this is very inspiring, this idea of getting more time and to think also in history and to the, cause and effect. So what is behind all these phenomena?
That's so true, because I apply this to me, and Thomas's whole description sounded so ideal to us. I mean, because we are very commercially driven. So this idea of being funded and being free to work, it was in UK, and they abandoned that model, and now it's a product. Education is being sold, and so this whole idea of reading and thinking, it's amazing, because actually Corona also allows us time to think. You see, we don't think with the students anymore. We don't think, and we go for the formula, or the simplistic solutions, or what's popular, or what's available outside in the plethora of kind of mixed messages. But we're not thinking.
I would also like to.
Oh, sorry.
I'm just quickly saying. I mean, I've kind of jokingly in teaching meetings said, why don't we have plumbing classes? A plumbing course or an electrician's course for all of our students, again, to kind of get them, engaged in the community, but also giving them other perspectives of experience. I'll leave it there.
No, I just want to add, because that of Aleksandar said, the first time of the pandemic, that it was very hard for all, for us posed the question of what is the meaning of what are we doing, and why are we doing art in a world that we cannot make theater anymore? So why are we doing that? And what that was very interesting to think with the students, because it's the key question.
So great.
Definitely.
We, unfortunately, our session is coming to the end, and I would like to see it as an inspiration for some people who could get different perspectives and different ideas. Of course, we are talking about so huge and important subjects. We could talk about 2-3 hours, but then now I'd like to ask you your final thoughts, and then we can conclude the session. I thank you again. And I let this invitation for people read more about it, try to find new things, and use this session just as a starting point, or in a way to enhance our social awareness and the perspectives of the world. So, Saana, I will let you your final thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you so much for organizing, and it was inspiring to meet and hear you all. For the final thought, I would say I've been giving these manifesto workshops because I agree with Juan that why is the most important question, and to define it for yourself, why, and in an inspiring form. So this is very interesting and important to dream, even though the situation is difficult. Because if artists don't dream, then who does?
Great. Yulia, your final thoughts, please.
Thank you so much. I just felt how I missed such conversation, how I missed international conferences, because all conferences have been postponed, even Russian conferences, and only now in November, conferences that had to be in March will be, and so on, so on. And pandemic made me miss the scientific life, and I totally agree both with Saana and with Aleksandar that pandemic showed us that we need probably slowness and connection with the science. And it also makes me think how to connect like art and science and society, and probably we all needed this time also, yes, to ask this question why and how and what we also get from it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Aleksandar?
Thank you for this amazing thought-provoking session. Please organize more of this. Bravo, Sao Paulo. You see, I did 2 books on Brazilian performing arts and theater. This thing comes from Brazil because Brazil is a place that brings things together, anthropophagia, and they make something new out of it. So in that spirit, just thank you for everything. Great ideas. And I would say this, I hope I don't get fired for this, but do not listen to government, listen to yourself and fight. Now is the time to fight. Fight for the thinking, fight for the truth, fight for education, fight for the enlightenment, and fight the control.
Great, thank you. Thomas, please.
I guess what I would have to say is, you know, we have a great opportunity here, you know, during these times. I mean, we're in very interesting times. We have a great opportunity as artists and as educators to really help make a shift in things that we have seen maybe for a long time coming. You know, these right-wing and political things have not just popped up out of nowhere. They've been developing over many decades now. And then also, again, just to reiterate the power of our students. You know, they have their finger in the pulse, you know, in a lot of areas that we don't, and that we should listen to them, take their initiatives seriously, and try and implement them as well. And again, I'm really grateful for you asking me to attend to this, and it was great meeting all of you. Hope we can continue this discussion in some way or another. And so thank you.
Thank you so much. Juan?
Well, thank you all of you, because it was very important for me to share this moment with you. And a last thought, let's break the algorithm. Please keep the conversation open and do art, read, do art. It's the only way we can save ourselves and maybe the world. I don't know. I hope so.
We hope so.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bom, pessoal, a gente está encerrando essa sessão, então. Deixa o convite, a programação está toda lá no site da SP Escola de Teatro. A gente vai ter outras sessões, né? Agora a 1h, às 3 tem outra, e depois Pocket Show às 5. Obrigado por tudo. Um abraço a todas e todos. Bye, bye.
Because it was very important for me to share this moment with you. And a last thought,